Biscayne National Park in Florida is facing struggle in keeping the park clean, healthy, and safe for the wildlife that calls it home. Overfishing, pollution, and invasive species threaten the wildlife as well as the further enjoyment of the park for its visitors. Biscayne National Park is located off the east coast of southern Florida in South Miami. Here we have an aerial view and an outline of the park. Biscayne is unique because 95% of the park is water. Biscayne Bay and its offshore barrier reefs are preserved here. There are 4 distinct ecosystems within the park. The shoreline mangrove swamp, where the swamps of the mainland and a rim of islands creates a nursery for young fish, mollusks, and crustaceans. The shallow waters of Biscayne Bay, which house immature and adult fish, sponges, soft corals, and manatees in soft beds of seagrass. The coral limestone keys, which are covered in tropical vegetation and create a nesting ground for endangered sea turtles. And lastly, the offshore Florida Reef, whose waters are home to over 200 species of fish, pelagic birds, whales, and hard corals. There are over 600 native fish and neotropical bird species throughout the overall park. Biscayne National Park is being overfished due to its many visitors who come to fish in the tropical water. The park prohibits the collection of many types of sea life, including threatened and endangered species. Here are a few of the 20 or so threatened and endangered species in Biscayne National Park. Biscayne is mitigating the issue in a couple of ways. Fishing and harvesting activities are strongly governed by state law. Collection of ornamental aquarium plants and animals are prohibited, and it is illegal to harm, harass, or capture a threatened or endangered species. Another piece to the issue of preserving Biscayne is pollution. The coral reefs are in danger of pollution due to some boundaries of the park being so close to large urban regions. Pollution causes changes in sunlight, nutrient loads, water temperature, salinity, and sediment load and deposition. These factors, along with other harmful substances in the water, are sickening and killing the coral, and consequently the other plants and animals. Pollution in Biscayne Bay is being mitigated by groups that are cleaning up trash in the park. Some of these cleanup sites include Convoy Point, the mouth of Maury Canal, and a couple of the park's keys. Last year alone, volunteers from Miami-Dade County removed over 40 tons of garbage from the bay. A third piece to the issue of preserving this national park is invasive species. Invasive species are non-native species of animals that cause or are likely to cause harm to the environment, including harm to other animals, plants, and even people. Here is a list of just a few of the many invasive species that are being observed in Biscayne National Park. What makes these species so invasive is that they are competing for food resources and have little to no natural predators in this area. Biscayne mitigates this issue by asking park guests to report sightings of invasive species, avoid contact with them, and to not release any species if they accidentally catch them. There are 2 sides to every argument, and conservation is no exception. One positive aspect of conservation in Biscayne National Park is that threatened and endangered species can start to recover and return to healthy populations. But in order for this to happen, fishing must be restricted in some areas. This can be an issue for fishing companies, thus creating a negative aspect. An aspect that can be both positive and negative is an increase in the population of a species. This is positive because the goal of conservation is to return threatened and endangered species to a healthy population. But the negative aspect is that once this happens, other species will be competing for the same resources. In conserving an environment, we want everything to be at a happy, healthy balance. But the fact is, with human interference, there will always be a consequence. The geology of Biscayne National Park is what allows for the amazing wildlife and for park visitors to enjoy this area. Here's how this beautiful park was formed. As I explained in part 1 of this presentation, Biscayne National Park is located off the east coast of southern Florida and is 95% water. The park consists of a bay, a row of barrier islands, and a few keys. To fully understand how Biscayne National Park was formed, one first needs to learn about plate tectonics. The Earth's outer crust is broken up into 7 major plates and many smaller plates. The relatively thin crust floats on top of the mantle, which acts like a fluid, allowing for plates to move around. When the plates move, they affect each other at their boundaries. There are 3 different types of boundaries. Convergent plate boundaries are where 2 plates are pushing against each other. The image on the left depicts a boundary where 2 pieces of continental crust are converging. The crust is being pushed upward, forming a range of fold mountains. The image on the right depicts a convergent boundary where a plate of oceanic crust is being submerged under a plate of continental crust. When the oceanic crust gets to a certain depth, the submerged rock gets so hot it starts to sweat. The water leaving the plate rises and melts rock along its way, causing plumes of magma to rise and form a chain of cascade volcanoes. Transform plate boundaries are where 2 plates slide past each other. This event is what causes earthquakes and tsunamis. Transform boundaries can also cause valleys to form along the fault. Natural earth features and even man-made structures can be offset as a result of this occurrence. At divergent plate boundaries, 2 plates pull apart. This allows magma to rise up and fill in the new gap of space, which hardens and forms new crust. This event is also what causes continental rifts, where continental crust becomes separated by newly formed oceanic crust. This is a type of plate boundary that helped create Biscayne National Park. Biscayne is formed on a passive continental margin. It is passive because it is a large distance away from an active plate boundary. Over time, as the North American plate and the African plate grew apart due to the mid-ocean ridge, which is a divergent boundary, there grew more and more oceanic crust between the 2 continental fragments. A sediment wedge formed as the continental crust eroded and transitioned into oceanic crust. To recap in simpler terms, Biscayne is formed on a sediment wedge that formed to transition from continental crust to oceanic crust as a way of compensating for the difference in thickness. Now that we know how the park was formed, we can learn about the formation of its features. Elliott Key is a barrier island. It is a buildup of sediment that eroded off the thicker continental crust. The island creates the barrier which forms Biscayne Bay between it and the peninsula of Florida. The tiny shell fragments that make up the seafloor, along with the bay made between the barrier island and the mainland, creates the perfect environment for a coral reef, which covers about half the park. This is the 3rd largest living coral reef in the world, and the only one in the continental United States. There are 4 main keys and 37 smaller islands in this park. The islands in the northern part of the park have rocky cores, and the southern islands are platforms made of coral. The up-close geography that visitors can find in this park include limestone, coral reefs, and lots of sand, from both crustal sediment and very finely ground coral. Whether visitors come to Biscayne Park for the wildlife, the geology, or both, there is one thing everyone can probably agree on, that this is a truly special and beautiful place.